Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be welcoming Paul Johnson, the city manager, up to the podium to provide an update on bargaining with Local 79. Paul, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. As Russell said, I just want to give you an update on our current bargaining with Local 79. Just to state off the start, the city has and continues to be available for bargaining at any time of the day. We've spent 22 days at the table, many of those with help of conciliators, and we can remain committed to that. As you know, yesterday we tabled a final offer and expect that Local 79 and their entire bargaining committee is reviewing that, and want to thank the union. I understand today they've indicated that they'll be responding to that today, which keeps the conversation moving along, which is good. Our final offer is a good deal. It recognizes the value and the hard work of these members, which number around 27,000 over the course of the year, and they do incredible work across a wide variety of services for those who live, work, play, and learn here at the City of Toronto. Throughout this process, we've heard from Local 79 and their leadership that they want to continue to have an open and transparent approach to bargaining, and our expectation is they'll continue that and have their members chime in on how we should move forward. We know and respect that the members of Local 79 are unique in what they do. We understand also that many of the jobs and the roles that their members fulfill are held predominantly by women, and it's a very diverse workforce. These are roles such as childcare workers and childcare aides, our nurses and our personal support workers, and we understand that. And I think there's been this sense that they're different. They are different. All of our workers here at the City of Toronto are different, and we recognize the differences within unions. We recognize the differences within divisions and parts of the work of the City of Toronto. And I'm proud of all of those differences and recognize that means we have to work differently as we invest in our people. We've listened closely to the views of the members and always balance those views and what we want to achieve collectively for the people who work here at the Toronto Public Service, alongside the financial realities of the City of Toronto and the priorities that are set for us by City Council. As we've stated previously, all the positions in Local 79 have as a base starting point 4-year deal that would see 14.65% of an increase in wages over that 4 years. And it starts with a nearly 4% increase at 3.95. And if you look at the current rate of inflation, that would make it just a little bit more than double the current rate of inflation here at the City of Toronto. And I know that the conversation has been that these members were working under a collective agreement that took us through some of the highest inflation rates that we've seen in quite some time. And our offer reflects that there is an acknowledgement that we are not simply basing this agreement on what the current inflation is. We're balancing what members have gone through over the last couple of years, what all Torontonians have gone through over the last few years, and trying to balance that out as well. In addition to these across the board, as we call them, so these sort of universal increases, we have been specifically addressing the key concerns that Local 79 has brought forward, and quite frankly, some of the concerns that we brought to the table, understanding the needs of the workers here at the City of Toronto. It starts with eliminating minimum wage for all workers, and we have now tabled that as part of our negotiations. So minimum wage paying jobs in Local 79 are gone. And that includes 100% of recreation workers. Currently, positions like those who work in childcare are some of the best paid in the sector, but we want to continue to lead. That's what the City of Toronto does, and that's why we're further investing in things like roles within childcare. Childcare aides, for instance, over the life of the contract, their increase would actually be 16.7%, and not the 14.65. Personal support workers, 16.8, and registered nurses, around 22%. Additionally, as you've heard me say in a couple of occasions, we absolutely have had to address the needs of our paramedics, the call takers, and everything else. And yes, paramedics are part of 416. That was part of the work that we're doing with 416. But in terms of Local 79, those call takers, those dispatchers, and those who train them, nearly 30% increase over the life of this contract. And that is about making sure that we can attract, train, and retain the very best. When people have to phone 911 in a medical emergency, they need to ensure, and they need to be ensured, that the very best people are answering those phone calls. And in terms of the extensive training that's required, we want to make sure we retain those workers for as long as possible. The 4-year deal is about having stability in uncertain times. And much of the work of council, of our mayor, and of staff in the last little bit, and certainly heightened by what's happened this week, is to respond to what are these increasingly turbulent economic times for everybody in this country. We also heard that some of the concerns of Local 79 included things that are not just about those core wages, shift premiums and benefits. Some specific benefits that came forward in those the negotiations right now around gender affirming care, family building benefit, increases in vision care, and access to benefits for part-time staff. So all of those things are things that are being addressed at the table, as they are, obviously, when we go through any negotiations with any of our unions. We tabled our final offer on yesterday, really in order to ensure that we had enough time to work together to get to a deal, and that's what we want to do. And we think there is lots of time for that. And again, I'm thankful to hear that we'll receive some feedback on that offer from the union today. That's what they've indicated. And we really want to work towards not having a disruption, particularly over what's happening next week. It is March break for families, and we want to make sure that that programming continues and the excellent workers in Local 79 are there to provide their services. So let me be clear again, we do not want to strike. Let me be clear again, this is first and foremost in thinking alongside all of the other things that are going on right now at the City of Toronto. We are very serious about the conversations that we're having. And this is not something that we are doing off the sides of our desks. This is something that we've invested. Critical staff members are there at the table. They are available all the time. And of course, folks like myself are always being included in those conversations. So today I just want to reiterate that as we get closer to the weekend, these are critical moments for us. We want to continue to do the work of discussing how we can use what I think is a strong investment in our workers in the best possible way to get what both sides have agreed to, which is we do not want a work stoppage. So it's wonderful to continue to hear that we agree on the fact that we don't want a work stoppage. So let's continue those conversations and get to the end result that we're all looking for. Now take some questions.
And for the media here in attendance, if you can use the microphone that Elise is trying to get out, state your name and outlet, please.
Hi, Paul. Mia Johnson, CGTN News. Is this the close to 15% increase over 4 years your final offer? Are you willing to negotiate further with the union? They said the offer still falls short on many of the needs of their members this morning. Are you willing to consider other alternatives?
So within any collective agreement process, there are plenty of ways to work through things. So that kind of base increase is not the only thing we're talking about. And I've described many of those things. So in terms of those across the board pieces, we feel very strongly that is a good position, but it's the things around that. So let's talk about those positions that are critical, like recreation workers, like some of the other positions I've just mentioned, call takers and dispatchers. I think that's where we can continue to listen to each other and work around what is the mandate that we have to invest and come up with the best deal possible.
And then just a follow-up. I know you're trying your best to avoid a strike, but in the event of a strike, at what capacity will city-run shelters, long-term care homes operate at? What are your contingency plans for keeping these services open? I know you said that they may be operating at not full capacity, but may still be able to be open during a strike.
So let me be clear on the two that you've talked about. They will be fully operational. Staff in long-term care facilities are under a different situation, so those will continue to operate staff that are in shelters, of course, won't be there, some of them, and we have contingency plans in place to ensure our shelters are fully operational. There are other services that would be impacted in the case of a work stoppage. That is where you may see differing levels of service. For instance, some of our facilities might not be open for the same hours they normally are. Not all of our counter services may be operating because we have staff that do that. There are some permitting things and things in bylaw enforcement, for instance, that might be adjusted. But let's be very clear, for those, some of the most vulnerable in our community, those in our long-term care facilities, those in our emergency shelters, those services will not be affected.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Paul. Matthew Bingley from Global News. I just was hoping you could clarify something. So you've said final offer a number of times. It seemed that the union took that to be the city has broken off negotiations. So can you just clarify, are you still willing to have the bargaining team for the city sit down with them to, needle through some of the other finer details? Or is this, where you're holding the line?
So absolutely, the conversation can continue and will continue. And this is a fairly standard approach to it. At some point, here is the package that we're looking at. But within that package, there is plenty of room to talk about where would we differently invest if that's the right way of talking about it, or what are some of the things that are still not quite perfect within this. But at some point, we needed to say, here is the package. We obviously have constraints that are placed upon us in terms of our negotiations at the table. And so we've been pretty clear. Now we have the package in front of us. Within that package, if there are things we can do to make this work for Local 79, that's the conversations that need to happen between now and Friday at midnight.
And could you just, for the parents who are trying to think ahead to next week, March break with the day camps, I know you've said that if this strike does go ahead, that it will mean canceling those. When is the period that you would see as the point where you would have to make that decision? Because a lot of them are trying to figure out what's going on next week. The union has put that midnight on Sunday deadline, but presumably a parent would want to know going into Friday night what their plans are the next week.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we placed the offer we did when we did is that we would leave ourselves time to work towards that Friday at midnight. I know that is barely enough time for families in and of itself. I think Sunday at midnight becomes really problematic. That means you got to stay up very late at night to understand if your childcare center will be in operation on Monday, let alone the March break camp. So our hope still is that the timing that it was originally laid out is what we moved to. I understand what the union has said this morning in terms of what they consider to be their deadline for making their decisions. I still think we have time to talk about this where we would be able to give some clarity first thing Saturday to families about what's happening next week. And we remain committed, as the union says they are, to making sure that there is no alternative arrangement that needs to be made. Our services would be open, and that's what we're focused on right now.
Hey, Paul, Momin Qureshi, 680 News Radio. This morning during the news conference, the head of QB79, when asked about this final offer, she said that it doesn't meet any of their demands, but you just said that you kind of gave to one of the big ones, which was offering up raises for part-time workers across the board. So what's kind of your take when you hear that their characterization is that you're not meeting any of their demands? I mean, it seems like the views on what's happening here are different.
Yeah, look, this is my 15th year in municipal life, working with all sorts of these types of negotiations, and you can always go into it hoping that the offer that we presented is perfectly acceptable, and we sign on Tuesday evening. So to say it's not enough or it's not what they need is not a surprise. That's why we tabled it when we did. If our deadline is midnight on Friday, then let's have a number of days where we can communicate about how best to get there. And so I think that's the point we're at. Right now, we wanted to be very clear about all our positions. One of the criticisms they've had is that, it's been partial pieces and how do you piece the whole thing together? They now have the entire package of what's on offer. And now we hone that a little bit as we get towards the final hours. And that's how we come to a deal.
So as we approach the final hours here, where's the level of optimism that a deal can be struck? And do you take a little bit of sign of optimism that they are willing to extend the deadline by a couple of days to give it a little bit more breathing room?
My biggest optimism is I heard very clearly today they don't want to have a work stoppage, so that's good. When I start to hear differences of opinion around that, then we have real difficulties. So discussions are continuing. Very thankful that we're going to get something from the union later today in terms of where they see some room for more conversation. And very thankful that we're continuing to work towards. I just like to see us put some energy and effort into trying to meet that deadline on Friday night, because I think for families and for workers and for everybody, it's just a better place to be than, having to stay up to the wee hours of the morning on Sunday into Monday morning to see where we're at. But we'll continue the process and see where that takes us.
Hey, Paul, Lane Harrison, CBC News. This morning, the union was expressing some frustration, saying that you yourself have not been with them at the bargaining table, and more broadly, that senior decision makers haven't been at the table, which is delaying the process. So I was just hoping to get you to respond to kind of them saying you specifically haven't been sitting down with them.
So for me specifically, I've been fully engaged in this process. The not sitting down at a table, and I'd say for the last week or so, there hasn't really been a table until we did our final offer. It's been through conciliators. So, to say that I'm not engaged in this is absolutely false. I can speak for myself. It's false. I have conversations on a regular basis with our team that includes senior leaders. The head of our employee relations, labor relations, is a member of our corporate leadership team. So they're there. The union president knows where I am. My email is well known and my phone number is well known. So, if there was some conversation that needed to happen, fine. But I don't think anyone should take publicly anything from the fact that I don't every day lead the bargaining team at the table. That is not something that's happened in other negotiations we've done over the past year. And again, in my experience municipally, it's not something city managers that I've worked for have been doing. It's not to say that there isn't an opportunity to have that conversation, but in terms of process, I don't think anybody should take from that. Because I know my own involvement in this, do not take from that I am disinterested in this. It is a core interest. And if you talk to the folks that are doing the work at the table, that are pulling together the work that we're doing with the union, I think they would say that it is a rare occasion where I don't pick up the phone when they call, and it's usually like, give me 5 minutes and I'll get back to you. So I'm available to our team. And so I don't think that's the issue here. If that needs to change, fine. But the other side is I trust the people that are doing really great work to work with me, go to the table, do the work that needs to be done.
And, we just had the big snowstorms, and people fairly or unfairly were pretty frustrated with how long it took to clean that up. And then we have another potential disruption coming that people, again, unfairly or fairly, might blame on city staff if this strike does happen. So what would you say to residents who are, feeling stressed and worried and maybe frustrated with what's been going on in the city lately?
It is stressful when the reality is that services may be disrupted. And so I understand that stress, and all I can say is just know that we are working very, very hard. What we brought as a negotiating package to the table, and what we are prepared to work around the edges and reorient in whatever way makes sense, I believe is a very fair deal. And so that's what people can expect and should expect from their city. And that's what's there. In terms of the anxiety that leads up to it, particularly I know for families and for our workers and for everyone that's involved with this, just rest assured we're going to continue to do whatever it takes to get a deal. And I'm pleased to hear and thankful to hear that the union's doing the steps that we need as well, which is providing some feedback to our offer, and also willing to engage over these next few days.
Hey, Paul, Aidan Schmandy from Toronto Today here. I'm wondering if you can give us a kind of a ballpark figure of what this latest update might cost, and also a general ballpark of what the whole offer altogether would cost the city.
So we don't talk about the specific packages financially for individual unions. Our chief financial officer said in terms of the budget for all of the negotiating we're doing across all the unions. So unfortunately, you're not going to be able to figure out what that is for Local 79, but we're talking about in and around 300 million. But what's most important is when you look at what I've been talking about, what it means for workers. that's where it comes in. I mean, this is a large union with a large number of workers on a regular basis. So you can start to see the size and scope of this. This is more than a few dollars that we're talking about in terms of the total mandate. But I think what you can focus on is some of what we've been talking about in terms of what is available for the workers. It's significant, but it's also within the mandate that we've been provided to go and do our work.
Yeah, and so on that 300 million, like there was the 416 deal, that was about 60 million. Local 79 is a significantly bigger union. There's a couple going to arbitration right now. There's firefighters coming up, cops. Are you confident that the 300 million is going to be enough? And if not, is there anything that can be done to push some of those settlements into 2026, or any kind of wiggling that you can do if this 300 million kind of is a hard cap?
So our discussions now have to be within this package. Like, what are we doing within this package in order to make it work? And so there's lots of room for flexibility. You know, if we need to talk about, certain benefits being higher or lower, or certain things being moved around within the package, there's flexibility to do that, particularly with such a sizable investment on the table. That's where that will be. In terms of massive amounts of new injections around this, that's not an option right now for us. It's really working within this envelope and seeing where we can go. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. And if there are any follow-up questions, please email media@toronto.ca. Thank you.